I want you to visualize something with me for a second. Imagine walking into a boardroom, big mahogany table, leather chairs, and sitting right at the head of that table is you.
Okay, I'm with you.
But it's not a business meeting. On the table, there isn't a quarterly financial report or a sales projection. Instead, there's this massive teetering stack of papers.
Wow.
And we're talking everything. We've got dense clinical trials from metabolic scientists. We've got these deep neuroscience journals, fitness research, and even some really fringe biohacking self-experiments. It's a huge, messy pile.
And all those papers, they're the different departments of your own body, right?
Yeah.
The problem is, it's usually a confusing stack because the departments aren't talking to each other.
Not at all.
The heart guy doesn't talk to the gut guy, and the brain guy definitely isn't talking to the gym guy. They're all operating in their own little silos.
Exactly. Which brings us really to the whole theme of today's deep dive. We are looking at mastering human longevity, but we're doing it through a very specific lens that one of our sources, Dr. Darshan Shah, proposes.
I love his framework.
He calls it becoming the CEO of your biology.
And that's such a powerful reframe because it completely shifts the power dynamic. I mean, think about how most of us treat our health. It's like we're a low-level employee in our own corporation.
Totally. We just show up, do our job.
And wait for that annual performance review, which is, that once-a-year doctor's visit, to tell us if we're getting promoted or getting fired.
Your cholesterol is up a few points. See you next year. And that's it. You go back to your cubicle.
Exactly. It's passive. It's reactive. And Dr. Shah's point, which is really the central thesis of this entire stack of research, is that you can't manage what you don't measure.
You just can't.
A CEO doesn't look at the profit and loss statement once a year. That would be corporate malpractice. They're looking at key performance indicators, KPIs, weekly, sometimes daily.
So the mission for us today is to dig through this stack and figure out what those KPIs actually are for a human body that doesn't just want to survive to 90, but wants to get there with vitality.
Vitality is the key word. That's
Yeah.
the whole game. We are not interested in just adding years to the clock.
No, being 100 years old and bedridden is not the goal. We want to understand the real difference between just keeping the heart beating and actually truly thriving.
And to set the mood for this, to really frame this CEO mindset, we have to start with a concept from another source, Dr. Jeffrey Gladden. And honestly, when I first read this in the notes, I thought it was a typo. He talks about having a 3,000-year-old mind.
Right. It sounds like something from a fantasy novel.
It does. It sounds like a typo or maybe a sci-fi plot. But it's actually a really profound psychological anchor. Gladden's entire philosophy is that the goal is to have a 30-year-old body and a 3,000-year-old mind.
Okay, you have to unpack that for me. Because usually when people talk about longevity, they say things like, I want to feel young again. They don't say they want their mind to feel ancient.
Right, but think about what ancient means in this context. The 3,000-year-old mind refers to wisdom, to perspective, the accumulation of knowledge and experience. It's the part you want to keep growing.
Okay, so the wisdom of the ages. I get that.
But the 30-year-old body part is where the rubber really meets the road. Gladden argues, and I think he's right, that we culturally condition ourselves to decay. We use this phrase all the time, good for my age.
Oh, I'm so guilty of that. I ran a 10K, which is pretty good for a 50-year-old.
We all are. I'm not as flexible as I used to be, but hey, I'm 40, whatever. And Gladden says that the moment you say, for my age, you have physiologically settled. You've accepted a lower standard of care for yourself. You've just lowered the bar.
I accepted the narrative of decline.
You've bought into it completely. So what he does is he personally identifies as being 27 years old.
Wait, he identifies as 27? Is he just delusional?
No, it's not a delusion. It's a strategic identity. It's a tool. When he wakes up in the morning, he asks himself a different question than most people. He asks, what does a healthy 27-year-old need to do today?
And how does that change things?
Think about it. If a 27-year-old wakes up and their back hurts, they don't say, well, I guess this is just aging.
No, they say, I must have tweaked something at the gym.
Exactly. I tweaked something. I need to rehab it so I can get back to peak performance. It completely changes your decision matrix from management of decline to maintenance of peak. It's a totally different operating system.
That is a subtle shift, but I can see how it changes everything. I mean, if I'm the CEO of a company that identifies as a market leader, I make fundamentally different choices than if I'm running a company that's just trying to avoid bankruptcy.
Precisely. You invest in R&D, you hire top talent, you don't just cut costs to survive another quarter. So with that CEO mindset firmly in place, that refusal to settle for average for your age, Let's dive into the corporate departments. And we have to start in the engine room.
The engine room. Metabolism.
Yeah.
This is where all the energy comes from.
It's the foundation of everything.
And we have some real heavy hitters in the source material here. Dr. Mark Hyman, Dr. Ben Bickman, Dr. Walter Longo. But let's just start with the biggest controversy right out of the gate. Dr. Mark Hyman basically takes a sledgehammer to the way we've thought about heart health for the last, 50 years.
He really does. He just dismantles the whole thing.
The narrative has always been so simple. Cholesterol is the villain. High LDL equals heart attack. Low LDL equals safety. I mean, that's the medical dogma we've all been raised on.
It's the first thing they teach you. It's the first thing they test for. Your LDL number is the big scary monster under the bed.
But Hyman points to this one study of 136,000 heart attack patients that just flips this entire idea on its head.
This study is genuinely terrifying if you're relying on standard advice. So they looked at people who were admitted to the hospital for a cardiac event, a heart attack, the very thing we're trying to prevent.
Okay.
And they measured their LDL levels right then and there.
And the results.
Well, they just don't fit the story we've been told.
Yeah.
75% of those people, 3 out of every 4, had normal LDL cholesterol.
Wait, pause right there. I need to process that. If I'm hearing you right, the vast majority of people who are actively having a heart attack would have passed their annual physical with a thumbs up on their cholesterol.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Their doctors would have looked at the number, said, your LDL is fine, it's in the healthy range, keep doing what you're doing, and then boom.
That's like finding out the smoke detector doesn't actually detect most fires. So what are we missing? If it's not the LDL cholesterol for most people, what is the actual smoking gun?
That's the multi-million-dollar question, and that's what Hyman digs into. While their LDL was normal, he points out that almost none of those patients had normal triglycerides or normal HDL, the so-called good cholesterol.
Okay. So the rest of the panel told a different story.
A completely different story.
Okay.
The pattern wasn't high cholesterol. The pattern was full-blown metabolic dysfunction. It was a pattern driven by sugar and insulin resistance.
So the cholesterol was at the scene of the crime, but sugar was the one who pulled the trigger. Is that a fair analogy?
That's a great analogy. Think of LDL cholesterol particles as the repair crew. They're like little trucks carrying spackle. They show up to patch holes in your artery walls.
Okay, patching is good.
It is, but you have to ask, what's causing all the holes in the first place? What's causing the chronic inflammation that requires constant patching? And Hyman's argument is that it's insulin resistance. When you have chronic high blood sugar, your arteries get inflamed and damaged. The cholesterol just gets stuck in the sticky, inflammatory mess.
So if I'm the CEO of my biology and I get a report from my doctor that just says LDL is normal, that's an incomplete report. I'm flying blind.
You are. You're looking at a vanity metric while the company is quietly burning through cash in the background. Hyman says we absolutely have to upgrade the dashboard.
What does that look like? What should we be asking for?
He says you need to ask your doctor for advanced testing. Specifically, he mentions things like ApoB, which gives you a particle count of all the bad cholesterol, not just its weight, and LPA, which is a genetic risk factor.
So it's a more detailed picture.
Much more detailed. But even more important than that, he says, is you need to check your fasting insulin.
And I feel like doctors rarely order a fasting insulin test unless you're already showing signs of being diabetic.
That's the tragedy. It's seen as a specialized test. But your blood glucose is a lagging indicator. Your blood sugar might stay perfectly normal for 10 years, while your pancreas is screaming, just pumping out massive amounts of insulin to keep it there.
So your body is working overtime in secret.
Completely. And fasting insulin reveals that strain on the system before the system breaks. If your fasting insulin is high, you are in the danger zone, period, regardless of what your cholesterol says. It's the earliest warning sign we have.
Okay, so the root cause here is this deep metabolic dysfunction. Too much sugar, too much insulin. This leads us perfectly to our next source, Dr. Ben Bickman.
Ah, yes. Dr. Bickman.
He's a metabolic scientist, and he goes even deeper. He doesn't just say sugar is bad. He explains the cellular mechanism. He brings up this critical relationship between glucose and something called NAD plus L.
Yes, NAD plus L.
Now, I see NAD plus on the menus at all these fancy IV drip clinics. It's always touted as the youth molecule or the anti-aging molecule. What is the actual connection here? What's it doing?
To really get this, we have to look at the cell like a tiny factory. Or actually, let's use a fireplace analogy. It might be a bit simple.
I like fireplaces. Let's do it.
Okay, so in this analogy, NAD plus is like the oxygen that allows the fire to burn clean and hot. It's essential for combustion. When you burn fuel like glucose or fat, you convert NAD plus into its used form, which is NADH.
Got it. Fresh oxygen becomes used oxygen or smoke.
A good way to think of it. And that's a normal part of the process. The cell is designed to then recycle that smoky NADH back into fresh NAD plus to keep the fire going efficiently. It's a constant cycle.
Makes sense. A clean burning cycle.
Right. But Dr. Bickman explains that when you have chronic high blood sugar, it causes a state he calls reductive stress. Basically, you are throwing way too much damp, unseasoned wood glucose onto the fire all day long.
The cell is just flooded.
It's flooded with electrons from all that sugar. It desperately tries to burn it, and in doing so, it converts all of its available NAD plus into NADH. But it can't recycle the NADH back fast enough because there's just a relentless flood of more fuel coming in.
So the fireplace gets choked, it's full of smoke and smoldering logs with no oxygen.
Exactly. You end up with a massive pile of NADH and almost no NAD plus PICs. The fire gets smoky, energy production plummets, and crucially, without NAD plus PIC, the cell can't perform its other essential jobs. It can't do DNA repair, can't clean up cellular waste.
So the maintenance crew gets laid off because the furnace is on fire.
Perfect. And this imbalanced ratio of NAD plus to NADH is what Bickman argues is a primary driver of insulin resistance at the cellular level.
Wow. It's a vicious cycle then. The high sugar depletes the repair molecule, which then causes insulin resistance, which then keeps the sugar high. So how do we unclog the fireplace?
Bickman says we have to stop throwing the wet wood on the fire. And he's very specific about this. He targets carbohydrates that come in bags and boxes with barcodes.
I like that rule. If it has a barcode, it's probably spiking your glucose.
It's a very good rule of thumb. I mean, processed carbs, refined grains, sugars, they hit the bloodstream almost instantly. By restricting those and using tools like intermittent fasting, you simply stop the constant fuel intake for a while.
You give the cell a break.
You give it a chance to catch its breath. It can finally burn through that backlog of NADH, restore its precious NAD plus levels, and get the factory running smoothly again. You're essentially clearing the assembly line.
Speaking of clearing the assembly line, let's talk more about fasting. Dr. Walter Longo is in our stack, and he brings some really serious caution to the table. I feel like in the biohacking world, there's this machismo about water fasting.
Oh, for sure. It's a badge of honor in some circles.
Right. I didn't eat for 5 days. I just drank water and black coffee. People brag about it. But Longo says, maybe bump the brakes on that. Maybe don't do that.
And this is where we have to be so careful with internet wisdom versus hard clinical data. Dr. Longo is a giant in longevity research. He's not some random influencer. And he points to mouse studies showing that strict water-only fasting can significantly increase what's known as gut leakiness.
Leaky gut. I've heard that term. So that means stuff from your intestines is literally leaking into your bloodstream.
That's exactly what it means. Bacteria, endotoxins, undigested food particles. The gut barrier is a very thin, very energy-expensive tissue to maintain. It's just one cell thick. If you completely cut off all nutrients, the body might start breaking down that barrier for energy.
So you're trying to heal your body, but you might actually be poisoning yourself from the inside out.
That's the potential risk. Suddenly you have this waves of systemic inflammation, which is the exact opposite of what you wanted from the fast in the first place. You're trying to put out one fire by starting another one somewhere else.
Okay, so that's a pretty serious warning. But Longo isn't anti-fasting, is he?
Not at all. He's just pro-smart fasting. He advocates for his creation, the fasting mimicking diet, or FMD. The idea is brilliant, really. You trick the body.
How do you trick your own body?
You eat very specific plant-based foods, very low in protein, low in sugar, with specific healthy fats that provide just enough nourishment to keep the gut barrier cells happy and intact, but not enough to trigger the body's main nutrient-sensing pathways, like mTOR and IGF-1.
So the body thinks it's starving, and it kicks off all the good cleanup processes, but the gut itself is still getting fed.
Precisely. You get the best of both worlds. The benefits are all there. Stem cell activation, the clearing out of old junky cells, that's a process called autophagy, even reprogramming of organs like the pancreas. But you get it without the risk of damaging that critical gut barrier.
How often does he recommend something like that? It sounds pretty intense.
It's not something you do all the time. He suggests doing a 5-day cycle, maybe 3 to 4 times a year, depending on your health status. Think of it as a scheduled quarterly deep clean for your corporate headquarters.
Okay, I like that. So we've tuned the engine, we've cut the barcode carbs, we're checking fasting insulin, maybe doing a quarterly FMD. But you can have a Ferrari engine, and if the chassis is rusted out and the tires are flat, you aren't going anywhere.
Which brings us perfectly to Section 2, fueling structure. We absolutely have to talk about muscle and bone. This is the physical architecture of you.
And this is another area where the advice seems to shift dramatically as we age. We have Dr. Donald Lehman and Dr. Arnie Ferrando in the stack, and their research on protein really contradicts what a lot of people, including a lot of doctors, still believe.
It does. It starts with the RDA, the recommended dietary allowance. For protein, that's set at 0.8 grams per kilogram of body weight.
Right, and most people hear recommended, and they treat that as the target. If I hit point 0.8, I'm good, I check the box.
And that's the big mistake. Lehman and Ferrando argue that the RDA is a bare minimum survival number. It's the amount of protein you need to not get a deficiency disease and waste away in a hospital bed. It is absolutely not the metric for vitality or optimization.
So what's the target if we want to be that thriving CEO, not just a surviving employee on the brink of being laid off?
They recommend nearly double that for aging adults.
Yeah.
The target should be somewhere in the range of 1.2 to 1.6 grams per kilogram of body weight. So for a 150-pound person, you're looking at over 100 grams of protein every single day.
Wow. That's a lot of chicken breast. That's a big steak. Why the huge jump? Why do we need so much more as we get older?
I thought our metabolism slowed down.
It does, but something else happens. It comes down to a crucial concept called anabolic resistance. This is so important for everyone over 40 to understand.
Anabolic resistance, okay.
When you're 18 years old, your body is an anabolic machine. It's primed to grow. You look at a weight, you eat a sandwich, and you build muscle. Your body is incredibly sensitive to the signal from protein. As we age, our muscles essentially become hard of hearing.
Hard of hearing, I like that. The signal to build muscle, which comes from the amino acids in protein, specifically one called leucine, needs to be much, much louder for an older muscle to even hear it and respond. You need a bigger dose of protein just to trigger the same muscle protein synthesis that happened easily when you were 20.
So we literally have to shout at our muscles with protein. A little whisper won't do it anymore.
Exactly. If you just graze on a little bit of protein here and there throughout the day, a bit of yogurt, a handful of nuts, you never hit the threshold required to turn the muscle-building machinery on. You're just eating calories, but you aren't building or maintaining your structure.
So what's the strategy then? Just eat more protein overall.
Dr. Lehman suggests a very specific strategy. Front-load it. You need to aim for a bolus of 30 to 50 grams of high-quality protein in your very first meal of the day.
50 grams in the morning. That's a serious steak and eggs. Or a mega smoothie with 2 scoops of whey.
It is a significant amount. But think about what's happening overnight. You're in a catabolic state, meaning you're breaking down tissue. That first meal determines the trajectory for the rest of the day. If you start your day with toast and orange juice, you're just pouring more sugar on the fire and continuing to break down muscle.
But if you hit it with 40 or 50 grams of protein...
You flip the switch. You slam the brakes on muscle breakdown, and you flip the big, loud, anabolic on switch for the rest of the day. And for longevity, muscle is your metabolic currency. It's your pension plan. It protects you from falls. It's a huge sink for glucose. You cannot afford to lose it.
Okay, that makes so much sense. And speaking of protection from falls, let's talk about the frame itself, bones. Because if muscle is the engine, bone is the chassis. And Dr. Doug Lucas in our stack suggests a biohack that...
Well, honestly, it sounds like an old wives' tale.
Are you talking about the prune intervention?
Yes. Prunes. I mean, come on. When I saw that, I laughed. Are we really saying the secret to longevity is dried plums? I was just as skeptical. It sounds like something your grandmother forces on you for, other reasons. But Dr. Lucas brings the data. He highlights multiple randomized controlled trials, the gold standard of research, showing that prunes are uniquely effective for preventing and even reversing bone loss, especially in postmenopausal women.
Okay, but what is the magic in a prune? What's going on there?
It's a combination of things, but the main player seems to be boron. Prunes are incredibly high in boron, which is a trace mineral that is absolutely essential for the bone matrix. It helps with calcium and magnesium metabolism. But they also contain specific polyphenols that seem to dampen inflammation right in the bone marrow.
And this has been proven in humans?
Yes. The data shows that eating them actually improves bone mineral density in critical areas like the spine and the forearms.
So what's the dose? Are we talking about eating a whole bag of these a day? Because that might have other consequences.
Thankfully, no. The effective dose used in the studies was about 50 grams a day, which is roughly 5 to 6 prunes.
Okay, 5 prunes. I can do that. That's manageable. But surely we can't just sit on the couch eating prunes and expect to have bones of steel. We have to move.
We absolutely do. But Dr. Lucas busts a huge, huge myth here. about how we should move for bone health. A lot of older adults are told by their doctors, be careful, go swimming, go cycling, keep it low impact.
Right, that's the standard advice. Save your knees. Low impact is always sold as the safe option for aging bodies.
It might be safe for the joints, maybe, but it does absolutely nothing for the bones. In fact, studies show that elite swimmers and cyclists often have lower bone density than sedentary people
Lower? How is that possible?
because they are in a gravity-reduced or non-weight-bearing environment. Bones are what's called piezoelectric. They need compression. They need impact. They need to feel force and stress to get the signal that they need to stay strong and dense.
You have to load the bone?
You have to load it. If swimming and cycling are out for bone density, what's in? He points to high-intensity resistance and impact training.
That sounds intense just from the name.
It is. It's the opposite of take it easy.
Yeah.
Dr. Lucas points to a specific study called the Lift-Er trial. It's just incredible. They took older women, many of whom already had low bone mass or osteoporosis, and they had them doing heavy, supervised compound lifts.
Like what?
Deadlifts, squats, overhead presses. And they combined it with impact exercises like jumping chin-ups where they would drop from the bar down to the floor to create impact.
Wait a minute, you're telling me they had grandmas with osteoporosis doing heavy deadlifts and jump squats? That sounds like a recipe for a slipped disc or a broken hip. Is that actually safe?
That was the fear, of course. Everyone thought the injury rate would be through the roof. But under proper supervision, the injury rate was incredibly low. And the results? They were undeniable. These women reversed their bone loss. They built new, dense bone.
Wow.
The takeaway is that your bones are constantly listening. They're waiting for a signal from you. If you baby them with gentle, low-impact activity, the signal is, we don't need to be strong, we can downsize. If you load them with heavy weight and impact, the signal is, reinforce the structure immediately.
Okay, I'm getting the picture. We're eating 50 grams of protein for breakfast, followed by 5 prunes, and then we're heading to the gym to deadlift. We are building a tank. But now let's shift gears to something a little softer, but maybe even more critical. Something we do, 20,000 times a day without thinking about it?
Breathing.
This section with James Nestor, honestly, it terrified me a little. We think breathing is just automatic. It's in the background. Who cares how you do it as long as you're getting air? But Nestor decided to test that assumption with a pretty brutal self-experiment at Stanford University.
A Stanford study. Yeah, this was visceral to read about. Nestor and a partner voluntarily agreed to have their noses completely plugged with medical-grade silicone for 10 straight days.
So they were forced mouth breathers.
Completely. They physically could not breathe through their noses. They wanted to see what would happen.
And what happened?
It was, in his words, catastrophic. He said the deterioration was almost immediate. Within the first night, his snoring increased by 1,300%.
1,300%. That's not a typo.
Not a typo. He went from making a little bit of noise to, as he put it, generating a sound that shook the windows. But that was the least of it. He developed sleep apnea.
From one night.
He started choking in his sleep, his blood oxygen levels plummeted, and his blood pressure. It spiked 13 points. He went from having perfect blood pressure to stage 1 hypertension in a matter of days.
Just from changing the airway, that's it.
That's the only variable that changed. Mouth breathing signals panic to the body. It activates the sympathetic nervous system. It's inefficient. It doesn't filter or humidify the air. It changes the pressure in your chest cavity. He said he felt anxious, fatigued, and incredibly foggy all day.
So what happened when they took the plugs out? Was the damage permanent?
This is the craziest part. Within 48 hours of returning to nasal breathing, all the major symptoms reversed. His blood pressure normalized. The sleep apnea completely vanished. The snoring dropped back down to almost zero.
That is just wild. It really highlights that mouth breathing isn't just a bad habit, it's actively damaging. But here's the problem. I can control how I breathe right now while we're talking, but I have no idea what I do when I'm asleep. My jaw might just fall open.
And that's the issue for millions of people. And that's where the very simple, if slightly weird, biohack comes in. Nestor is a huge advocate for sleep tape.
I've heard of this. It sounds like you're preparing for a hostage situation. You're actually taping your mouth shut.
It sounds scary, but it's not what you think. It's just a tiny piece of light, porous tape-like 3M surgical tape placed vertically over the center of the lips. The goal isn't to seal the mouth airtight. It's just to provide a gentle sensory signal to the jaw to stay closed.
I have to admit, I actually tried this once after reading his book. I ripped it off in my sleep the first 3 nights. I'd wake up and it would be stuck to my cheek.
That's super common. And that just means your body was trying to default to mouth breathing. But eventually, you train the neurology. Your brain gets the message. and for vitality. Ensuring that you are oxygenating your brain and body efficiently for the 8 hours you're asleep is probably more impactful than any expensive supplement you can take.
Okay, that's a powerful point. And speaking of sleep, let's bring in the sleep guru himself, Dr. Matthew Walker. But he's not just talking about the brain, he's connecting sleep to a very surprising place, the gut.
The gut-sleep axis. This is really cutting-edge research. We usually think of sleep as being all about the brain, melatonin, circadian rhythm, that sort of thing. But Walker discusses this fascinating study with Parkinson's disease mouse models.
Okay.
These mice, as part of their disease, had terrible sleep disruption, fragmented, awful sleep. And the researchers were trying to figure out why. They found a direct causal link to low levels of a short-chain fatty acid in their gut called butyrate.
Butyrate, okay. I've heard of that being good for gut health. But why does the brain care about a fatty acid that's made in the colon?
Because butyrate is a powerful signaling molecule. It doesn't stay in the gut. It gets into the bloodstream and travels to the brain. And when they supplemented these mice with butyrate, it completely normalized their sleep architecture. It fixed their sleep.
It fixed their sleep better than sleep drugs.
Get this, it worked better than the dopamine drugs that are the standard treatment for Parkinson's.
That is huge. So their insomnia wasn't just a brain firing issue. It was, at its root, a microbiome deficiency.
That's exactly the implication. So the actionable advice from this isn't just take a sleeping pill or wear an eye mask. It's feed your sleep. You need to feed your gut bacteria the right kind of fiber things like oats, barley, legumes, apples, so they can produce the butyrate for you.
So oatmeal for dinner might actually lead to better sleep.
Indirectly, but powerfully, yes.
Yeah.
If you starve your gut bugs of fiber, you are starving your brain of the very signals it needs to initiate and maintain deep sleep.
Let's talk about one more crucial signal for sleep. Light. We all know the basics, or, blue light from screens is bad at night. But Professor Roseanne Kenny and Dr. Shivani Gupta have some more specific protocols here.
It all comes back to the master clock in your brain, the suprachiasmatic nucleus, or SCN. It's this tiny little cluster of cells that sits right above your optic nerve. It needs a blast of bright light in the morning to start the countdown timer for sleep at night.
That's the anchor for the whole day.
It's the anchor. Dr. Gupta has a great phrase for it. He calls it kissing the sun. You have to get outside for 10 or 15 minutes in the morning without sunglasses.
A morning meeting with the sun.
Right. If you don't get that anchor in the AM, your SCN just drifts. And then at night, any bright light, especially blue light, actively suppresses the SCN and your melatonin production. Professor Kenny recommends a strict digital sunset at least an hour before bed.
But she also adds a nutritional tip, right?
She does. She talks about tryptophan.
Like the turkey coma we all get on Thanksgiving.
Exactly like that. Tryptophan is an amino acid that is the direct precursor to serotonin, which then gets converted into melatonin in the dark. So she suggests having tryptophan-rich foods a couple of hours before bed, like fatty fish, turkey, or even cottage cheese. You're providing the raw materials for the sleep hormone factory.
Okay, moving down the stack, we've covered the hard machinery, the metabolism, the muscles, the bones. Now we need to talk about the software, the operating system, the hormones, and specifically Section 4, hormonal intelligence.
This section is so critical, and we really need to focus on women's health here because the sources, Dr. Tina Moore and Karen Martell, are highlighting these massive gaps that mainstream medicine often ignores or gets wrong.
Yeah, let's start with Dr. Tina Moore. She talks about the magic window for hormone replacement therapy, or HRT. And I feel like for the last 20 years, the message to women has been really negative. HRT is dangerous, it causes cancer, avoid it at all costs.
That fear is pervasive. And it all stems from the big Women's Health Initiative study from the early 2000s, which has since been heavily critiqued and reevaluated for its flaws. The new consensus, which Dr. Moore champions, is that timing is everything. She argues that HRT should ideally start before menstruation stops, in that perimenopausal transition.
Why the rush? Why not just wait until the symptoms, like hot flashes, become unbearable?
Because by then you've already lost years of protection. Estrogen isn't just a reproductive hormone, it's neuroprotective, it's cardioprotective, it's essential for bone health. If you start HRT within that magic window, which is generally considered to be within 10 years of menopause and under the age of 60, you get profound benefits for your brain and bones.
And if you wait too long?
If you wait until you're, say, 70, those estrogen receptors in your brain and your arteries have degraded. The ship has sailed. You've missed the boat for a lot of the protective benefits.
Dr. Jeffrey Gladden weighed in on this too in the notes. He cited a statistic about dementia that just stopped me in my tracks.
It's staggering, isn't it? He cites a study showing a 40% reduction in the risk of developing dementia in women who took any form of HRT.
40%.
And when you consider that Alzheimer's disproportionately affects women, 2/3 of all Alzheimer's patients are women, this isn't a small issue. This is a massive public health crisis that we might have a tool to mitigate.
It's huge. But identifying when you might need it can be tricky. Dr. Moore lists some of these overlooked early symptoms of low estrogen that I had never heard before. We all know about hot flashes, but she mentions waking up at 3 a.m.
Yes, the wolf hour. You wake up, heart racing, mind wide awake, for no reason at all. That is a classic sign of dropping estrogen, causing a cortisol spike in the middle of the night. Another one is alcohol intolerance.
Waking up hot and sweaty after just one glass of wine.
Right. Women who used to be able to enjoy a glass of wine suddenly find it makes them feel terrible, gives them hot flashes, anxiety, or a pounding headache the next day. That's not just a bad hangover, that's a hormonal signal. Your liver's ability to process alcohol changes.
Wow, and she also mentions a skin-related one.
Yes, flaccid or ripping skin. Skin that suddenly loses its elasticity and tears easily. That's because collagen production is heavily dependent on estrogen.
And before we leave hormones, Dr. Tina Moore has a very timely warning about the drug of the moment. The GLP-1 agonists. Ozempic, Wegovy. It seems like everyone is on them to lose a few pounds.
And that's precisely the danger she highlights. She's not against these drugs for their intended use for diabetics or the severely obese. She is issuing a serious warning against microdosing these powerful drugs for vanity weight loss. And, if you're already relatively thin and just have that last 10 or 15 pounds to lose.
What's the harm in that? I mean, who doesn't want to be a little bit leaner?
The harm is what she calls the loss of the estrogen depot. Body fat isn't just inert storage, it's an endocrine organ. It produces and stores estrogen. If you are a woman in your 40s or 50s and you use these drugs to rapidly strip away your body fat, you are essentially performing a chemical ovarectomy on yourself. You're removing your reserve tank of estrogen right when you need it most.
And what are the consequences of that?
Accelerated aging, the Ozempic face that people talk about, that gaunt, hollowed look, isn't just lost fat. It's lost collagen and bone support from the hormonal crash. You can see dramatic hair loss, mood instability, and a complete crash in libido. It's a huge metabolic price to pay for a little bit of vanity.
That is a very sobering perspective. Okay, let's zoom out a bit. We've done the chemistry, the structure, the hormones. Now, section 5, wiring the mind and body. This is where we get into the nervous system.
The body's electrical grid.
And the star player here is the vagus nerve. Dr. Kevin Tracy has a story in the notes about a woman named Kelly Owens that honestly sounds like a miracle from a sci-fi movie.
It really does. It's an incredible case study. Kelly had severe, debilitating Crohn's disease, a terrible autoimmune condition. She had failed every drug on the market, biologics, steroids, even chemotherapy drugs. She was effectively disabled in constant pain.
So the chemical approach wasn't working.
It totally failed her. So, as part of a clinical trial, Dr. Tracy's team implanted a vagus nerve stimulator. You can think of it like a pacemaker, but for the massive nerves that runs from your brain all the way down to your gut.
And what happened?
Complete remission. She takes no medications for her Crohn's disease now. She's living a normal life.
How does zapping a nerve in your neck cure a raging inflammatory disease in your intestines?
Because Tracy discovered something he calls the inflammatory reflex. For decades, we thought the immune system just did its own thing, that it was autonomous. Tracy showed that the brain actively controls the immune system via the vagus nerve. It's like a brake line.
A brake line.
When you stimulate the vagus nerve, it sends a powerful anti-inflammatory signal down to the spleen, which is a major hub for immune cells. It basically tells the spleen, stand down, stop producing these inflammatory cytokines.
So the CEO in the brain tells the security department to calm down.
That's a perfect way to put it. And the wildest part of the story, she doesn't have this machine running 24/7. They found that stimulation for just 1 minute a day provided a full 12 hours of anti-inflammatory protection.
1 minute. That just shows how profoundly electrical we are. We're always trying to fix everything with chemistry or with pills, but sometimes we just need to fix the wiring.
Which leads us to the ultimate wiring tool we all possess.
Yeah.
Our own mindset.
Amy Purdy. Her story is just beyond belief. She lost both of her legs below the knee at 19 years old due to a bout of bacterial meningitis.
It's a tragedy that would just completely crush most people for the rest of their lives.
Hmm.
But while she was still in the hospital recovering from these amputations, she started visualizing snowboarding.
Before she even had prosthetic legs.
Way before. But she didn't just daydream about it, she visualized it with such sensory intensity. She said she could feel the cold wind on her face, she could hear the sound of the board carving on the snow, she could feel the pressure on the edges of a board she didn't have. And she said she could physically feel her muscles twitching in her hospital bed. She was firing those neural pathways over and over. She was building the software for snowboarding before she had the hardware, the prosthetics, to actually do it. And as we know, she went on to become a Paralympic snowboarding medalist.
That's incredible. And this connects so well to Dr. Reed Montague's work on dopamine. He says we completely misunderstand dopamine. We think it's just the pleasure molecule.
Right, the sex, drugs, and rock and roll molecule, the reward chemical. But Montague's research argues that dopamine is actually about prediction error. It's a teaching signal.
Prediction error. What does that mean?
Dopamine spikes when reality is better than you expected. It crashes when reality is worse than you expected. It's not about the pleasure itself. It's about the difference between your expectation and the outcome.
Okay, so how does that apply to us in a practical way?
Well, Amy Purdy used visualization to train her brain's prediction models. She ran the simulation so many times that by the time she got on the snow, her brain said, I know this. I predicted this outcome. No negative prediction error. But Montague also applies this to something like dating.
Oh, this should be good.
His advice is collect data slowly. If you match with someone on a dating app and you immediately start fantasizing that they are the one, you create this massive skyscraper-sized dopamine expectation.
Right, you've already planned the wedding.
Exactly. You meet them for coffee and they chew with their mouth open, or they're just a normal, flawed human being. The reality falls catastrophically short of your prediction. Dopamine crashes. You feel pain and disappointment.
So lower your expectations to protect your dopamine levels.
Or just stay grounded in the actual data, not the fantasy. Manage your prediction errors to maintain your mental and emotional stability. It's brilliant advice.
It's a very good life advice. Now, for the ultimate metric, we've talked about prunes, deadlifts, hormones, nerves, but Professor Roseanne Kenny from our source stack says the #1 health tip isn't found in a pharmacy or a gym. It's friendship.
It consistently, in study after study, ranks as the #1 predictor of longevity and health span, more important than quitting smoking, more important than obesity or exercise. She talks about the famous Roseto study. Have you ever heard of Roseto, Pennsylvania?
It sounds vaguely familiar, a small town with an Italian community.
Exactly. Back in the 1950s and 60s, researchers noticed something really weird. In the small, tight-knit town of Roseto, almost no one under the age of 65 was having a heart attack. The town's death rate was about half the national average.
So they must have been super healthy, right? Eating a perfect Mediterranean diet, running marathons.
That's what the researchers thought, but they were completely wrong. The Rosetans smoked stogies, they drank wine freely, they fried their meatballs in lard. Many of them worked in slate quarries, inhaling dust all day. On paper, their lifestyle should have been killing them.
So what was the secret sauce?
It was a community. The social fabric was incredibly strong. 3 generations often lived under one roof. People stopped to chat on the street. There were all these social clubs. No one was ever truly alone. The researchers concluded that the powerful social structure buffered the physiological stress so effectively that it actually negated the bad diet and lifestyle habits.
So connection is an anti-inflammatory. Loneliness is inflammatory.
That is the takeaway. And Kenny contrasts this with the modern Don't study. They've followed 1,000 people born in the same year in New Zealand for their entire lives. At age 38, they measured their biological age. Some of the 38-year-olds were biologically 28, others were biologically 50.
A 22-year spread at the same chronological age.
A massive spread. And a huge driver of that accelerated aging was adverse life events, trauma, and a lack of strong social support. If you are the CEO of your biology, your board of directors, your friends, your family might be your most important asset.
Okay, we're in the final stretch. Section 6, advanced biohacking and some really simple tools. And let's get a little weird first. Young plasma exchange.
This is definitely the Silicon Valley billionaire end of the spectrum. Dr. Con Nguyen and the famous biohacker Ben Greenfield discussed this procedure. It's exactly what it sounds like. It involves removing your old plasma, the liquid part of your blood, and replacing it with plasma from young, healthy donors.
It sounds like a vampire movie. It really does sound like something a tech billionaire does in a secret bunker in New Zealand.
It'd have that vibe, for sure. But the science behind it is fascinating. The idea is that aging isn't just about things breaking down, it's about the accumulation of toxic signals in your blood. These inflammatory cytokines, these secretions from zombie senescent cells, if you can literally do a blood wash and replace it with clean, young plasma, you might be able to reset the entire signaling environment of your body.
Is this something normal people can do? Does it work?
It's still very expensive and highly experimental. But Ben Greenfield reported significant improvements in performance and aesthetics after doing it. It's important, though, to distinguish this from standard therapeutic plasma exchange, or TPE, which just uses albumin solution. The young plasma-specific exchange is the really controversial frontier.
Okay, so for those of us who can't afford to swap blood with a 20-year-old, Dr. Darshan Shah and Dave Asprey have some much simpler, more accessible tools.
Dr. Shah, going back to that CEO concept, suggests two really cheap gadgets that everyone should have. First, a bioimpedance scale. Don't just weigh yourself. That number is useless. You need to know. Are you losing fat, or are you losing that metabolically expensive muscle we work so hard to build?
Right, the quality of the weight matters more than the quantity. And the second one,
A simple grip dynamometer.
the thing you squeeze at the gym.
Yes. It costs like $14 on Amazon. But grip strength is one of the most robust, well-studied biomarkers for longevity. It's a proxy for your overall neuromuscular integrity. If your grip is weakening year over year, it's a powerful signal that your entire system is declining. It's a cheap, fast, early warning system.
I love that. So simple. And Dave Asprey brings up another simple metric, leg strength.
He cites a big UCLA study that followed 4,000 adults. It showed that having weak leg muscles was a powerful predictor of early death. And it makes perfect sense. Your legs contain your biggest muscle groups. They are your primary metabolic sink for disposing of sugar. If they are weak and atrophied, your whole metabolism suffers.
So what can you do besides squats? He recommends a supplement.
He does. A compound called urolithin A.
Urolithin A, what's that?
It's a fascinating molecule. It's actually a postbiotic, meaning our gut bacteria produce it from compounds found in things like pomegranates and walnuts. The problem is not everyone has the right gut bugs to make it, so you can supplement with it directly.
And what does it do?
It activates mitophagy.
Mitophagy. So that's like autophagy for mitochondria.
Exactly. Think of it as cellular housekeeping for your power plants. It goes into your cells, identifies the old dysfunctional mitochondria that are sputtering out smoke, and recycles them. This prompts the cell to make new, efficient ones. One study he mentioned showed it increased muscle strength by 12% without any change in exercise.
That's basically a free boost. I'll take that. And finally, Dr. Shivani Gupta brings us full circle back to some really ancient tech.
Turmerica. But she's very specific about it. She calls it a janitor for cleaning up cellular debris in zombie cells. The absolute key, though, is absorption. Curcumin, the active compound, is very poorly absorbed on its own. You have to take it with black pepper, which contains piperine, or a healthy fat source. That can increase its absorption by up to 2,000%.
Wow. And she also mentioned something for the mouth.
Yes, tongue scraping. Specifically with a copper tongue scraper. It's an ancient Ayurvedic practice. It physically removes the biofilm of bacteria that accumulates on your tongue overnight. It's a simple 10-second detox for your oral microbiome, which we now know has a direct impact on the health of your heart and your gut.
So let's try and wrap this massive deep dive up. We've gone from eating 50 grams of protein and 5 prunes for breakfast to doing heavy deadlifts to taping our mouths shut at night to checking our grip strength and maybe even considering a plasma exchange if we win the lottery.
It is a massive stack. It can feel really overwhelming, but if you take a step back and look for the pattern, it all comes down to one word.
Signals.
Signals.
Yes.
Everything we discussed today is a signal. Lifting at heavy weight sends a powerful signal to your bones and muscles to stay strong. A big dose of protein sends a signal to your muscles to grow. Morning sunlight sends a signal to your brain to wake up and start the clock. Friendship sends a signal to your nervous system that you are safe and supported.
And on the flip side, a bagel for breakfast sends a signal of inflammation and energy storage.
Exactly. You, as the CEO, are the chief signaling officer of your body. You get to decide which signals you send every minute of every day. You can send signals of decay and decline, or you can send powerful signals of vitality and regeneration.
So for the listener right now who is maybe feeling a little overwhelmed by this new to-do list, what's the final provocative thought? Where do they start?
I'd go back to something simple that J.J. Virgin mentioned in the notes about Zone 2 cardio. That easy conversational pace exercise. It's the metabolic sweet spot that builds mitochondrial efficiency without spiking stress hormones like cortisol. but I'd combine that with Professor Kenny's #1 metric.
How so?
If social connection is truly the most powerful health intervention we have, then maybe the best way to do your Zone 2 cardio isn't alone on a treadmill watching the news. Maybe it's going for a long walk with a good friend. You're sending multiple powerful signals at once.
I love that. The most important supplement might not be a pill. It might be a dinner party or that walk with a friend.
Exactly.
So here's the challenge for everyone listening. Pick one thing from this stack. Just one. Maybe it's the 5 prunes. Maybe it's trying the sleep tape tonight. Maybe it's just picking up the phone and calling a friend you haven't seen in a while to schedule that walk. But pick one thing and start being the CEO of your biology today.
Vitality is a series of small choices. Make one of them now.
Thanks for diving in with us. We'll
Yeah.
see you next time.